What's going on, guys? Billy here, and right off the bat, I hate reviewing ND filters because no matter which set you purchase from any of the various companies that make them available, they all do the same exact thing. They accomplish the same task. Now, with that said, when you have a set like PolarPro's Director's Collection here, this $400 set of ND filters, or if you plan on purchasing just a single ND filter from PolarPro for $80, it's definitely worth talking about. So I first have to comment on the striking design of these filters because after all, if you're going to be spending this much money on glass, they better look awesome, and PolarPro definitely didn't disappoint. The case is well constructed, it offers great protection, and it just simply looks badass. I'm almost worried to put this thing in my bag out of fear of scratching it because it looks so nice. Now all of the same goes for the filters themselves. The pale gray with gold accents look really nice together, and the construction of the filters is top notch. They're made from what PolarPro calls Airframe 4.0, which gives them a lightweight aluminum build. They aren't too heavy to the point where they're going to interfere with the gimbal's operation during flight, like the gimbal motors are still snappy and responsive. The design and color scheme look even better too when mounted on the drone, as it adds a pop of color to the Mavic 3 that is primarily just gray and black. Now, probably more important than the build quality of the filters themselves is the quality of the glass. In my time shooting with these filters, I have never noticed any weird shift in image quality, sharpness, and there isn't any weird shifting in color. I can't speak for all of the other filters on the market, but regardless of whether you're using DJI's ND filters, DJI's clear lens protector, or these PolarPro filters, the image through and through is going to look just as it should out of the camera. Now, PolarPro makes a wide range of filters available for the Mavic 3, from their clear protective lens to standard ND filters to variable ND filters. They also have a few special filters like their gold morphic, blue morphic, and mist filters, all of which you can purchase separately, like individually or in packs. As I mentioned in the beginning, the pack that I have here, the Director's Collection, features a ND8 polarizer, ND16 polarizer, ND32 polarizer, a variable ND2 to 5, and variable ND6 to 9 stop, as well as a clear protective filter, gold morphic filter, blue morphic filter, and a mist filter, so 9 total filters. The ND filters themselves are pretty self-explanatory in what they do, but the 3 effect filters, as I call them, give your images a different stylistic look. The first 2 are the blue morphic and gold morphic filters that, for a lack of a better term, have these lines positioned vertically throughout the glass. They're meant to simulate the look of a lens flare that you'd otherwise only be able to achieve with an anamorphic lens. The blue morphic filter will give you a classic blue lens flare, while the gold morphic filter will give you a golden yellow lens flare. Now, I want to quickly point out an issue that I ran into when using either the blue or gold morphic filter. If you bring your aperture all the way up to f11, you will clearly see those vertical lines on the glass in the frame. With that said, you'll have to stop your aperture down to then properly expose your image with the shutter speed, which kind of defeats the purpose of using a filter during the day in the first place. Now, PolarPro does sell a combination of variable ND filters and blue or gold morphic filters, so the ones that I have here with no neutral density would really only be good to use when flying at nighttime. With that being said though, I think that at nighttime is really the only time you'd want to use either the blue or gold morphic filters on your Mavic 3. When flying during the day, you're going to be using the natural sunlight and aren't setting up lights for your drone shots, so therefore the special lens flares really don't add any value at all. I think that these special filters work really well on mirrorless cameras where you're playing with lighting more, but on a drone, it's usually pointless unless flying at nighttime. Here's the thing though, if we take the 3 special filters out of the equation and just look at the ND filters, there's absolutely no reason to be carrying this many filters around with you, especially for a drone like the Mavic 3. Some of the available drones on the market right now, like DJI's Air 2S, have a fixed aperture in their camera. So in this case with this drone, we've got a fixed f2.8 aperture. So this means that if you want to adjust the exposure of your camera, you can only change your shutter speed or your ISO. And as you can imagine, on a bright sunny day with a wide open f2.8 aperture, you're gonna have to crank your shutter speed up high in order to compensate for that bright sunlight. Now, what's great about higher end drones like the Mavic 3 is that it has an adjustable aperture. So this camera can change from f2.8 all the way up to f11, which makes needing multiple ND filters kind of pointless and kind of useless because you've got much better control over your exposure without actually changing how your image looks. And what's great is you can do it all from the ground from your controller without having to land the drone and change the intensity of your variable ND filter or swapping out filters entirely. Now, when you adjust your aperture, it has a massive effect on the depth of field when shooting with a camera, but primarily a camera on the ground. Now, there are other factors that play a role and can change your depth of field, like your sensor size and focal length, but to give you a quick demonstration, when shooting at 50 millimeters with my aperture set to f2.8, there's a beautiful layer of bokeh behind my head, which isolates me as the subject and draws the viewer's attention to me. It's a really clean and professional look that completely vanishes when cranking the aperture up to compensate or adjust my exposure instead of using a ND filter. So using these filters are really important when experimenting with depth of field in a ground-based camera. Here's the thing when shooting with a drone though, you are never going to get any sort of depth of field in any of the aerial clips that you shoot. It doesn't matter if you're capturing a landscape or you're capturing a building or you're following a subject like a person or a boat or a vehicle. Doesn't matter if you shoot at f2.8 or f8, your image is going to be sharp through and through. There's going to be no depth of field. Funny enough though, the only time that I've seen a drone's camera have any sort of depth of field is when sitting on the ground ready for takeoff. And you usually focus towards the middle of your frame, so therefore anything behind that point and in front of that point is going to be out of focus and blurry. Now, there is an argument to be made that cameras and lenses will produce sharper looking images when set to specific aperture levels. So in the case of the Mavic 3, for example, maybe a photograph captured at f8 will be sharper through and through from the center of the image all the way to the edges of the image than say a photo captured at f2.8. But quite frankly, the difference is so negligible that I'd rather use the adjustable aperture as a tool to properly expose my image rather than worrying about that negligible amount of sharpness difference between one aperture level over another aperture level. With that said, my workflow for years when flying a drone with an adjustable aperture from the Phantom 4 Pro to the Mavic 2 Pro to now the Mavic 3 Cine is to literally carry one filter, and that is a ND8 filter. My rule of thumb is that if it's light out, the filter goes on, and if the sun has set and there isn't a lot of light, then I swap it out for the stock clear lens that came with the drone. Implementing this one filter workflow really makes things easy as you don't have a ton of filters to carry around with you and choose from, but instead you've got two to choose from: your ND8 filter when flying during the day and your clear protective lens when flying at nighttime. I'd also recommend using the clear protective lens when flying during the day when shooting photographs, so you don't have a bunch of motion blur unless that's the effect that you are going for. Now, I also find that the ND8 filter gives you the perfect amount of neutral density when flying during the day, whether it's a cloudy day or a sunny day. It puts you like right in the middle of your adjustable aperture here with the Mavic 3. So usually I'm flying during the day at like f5.6 or f8, and that gives me room to stop my aperture up or down to adapt to changing lighting conditions. Maybe it's a cloudy day and we've got a big cloud rolling in, or maybe I'm dealing with a bright hotspot on the side of the building and I've got to stop my aperture up in order to compensate for that. Now, as we transition into say the nighttime and the sun is setting, I'll land my drone, I'll take off my ND filter, put my clear protective lens back on, and I've now got my adjustable aperture to kind of get me through the entire night. I can shoot at f11 when I'm shooting sunset, and as the sun continues to set and I lose light, I can stop that aperture down to then be shooting at nighttime. So with all of that said, here's what I would recommend. If you own any of DJI's ND filters already, there's really no reason to purchase any of PolarPro's filters unless you wanted to grab one of their effect filters to give a different feel to your photos and videos, or maybe you just like the pale blue and gold look of the PolarPro filters and you'd rather rock those on the front of your drone instead of DJI's OEM gray filters. But just know that there's no quality difference between the two pieces of glass, so don't think that you're going to get a sharper looking image from the PolarPro filters over the DJI filters. Now, if you don't own any filters though, I'd recommend checking out PolarPro's Vivid Collection 3-pack that comes with a ND8, ND16, and a ND32 filter, all of which also have a circular polarizer that you can adjust. This is actually cheaper than DJI's own 4-pack, and sure, it does come with an extra ND4 filter, but you probably would never use it. Now, I should also mention that with a simple search on Amazon for DJI Mavic 3 ND filters, there are some great budget options on here that I haven't tried, so I can't endorse anything on here, but I'm seeing like some Typhon filters for only $69. I'm seeing Skyread filters for $35. A single Skyread filter for $19. Even Freewell has a great 8-pack for $150. So just know that there are options out there, and be sure to go and check out some videos to see which one is going to fit your budget properly. If you want to go with my route though, I'd suggest heading over to PolarPro's website and purchasing just one single filter. Yes, it is going to run you about $79.99, which is fairly expensive for one small piece of glass, but it is the one and only filter that you will need. And I'm sure you guys can already guess, it is the ND8 polarizer. It's the filter that pretty much lives on the front of my Mavic 3 when I'm shooting all day long. And of course, I switch over to my clear protective lens when shooting at nighttime. But I'm saying adopt that one filter workflow, and it's gonna make things so much easier. Anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts on these filters down below. And if you already own Mavic 3 ND filters, which ones are you rocking and do you like them? Anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later. Peace.